Today I'm here with Mary Myers, peace activist, meditator, therapist, and meditation instructor. Welcome, Mary. Thanks for coming.
I'm really glad to come, Kathy. Thank you.
So today we're going to be talking about how meditation has influenced your life and how your practice has influenced it and how you got involved in all of that.
Okay, great.
So you can start anywhere. So how did you get involved in meditation? Where did that start?
Well, I think the truth is that for like almost anyone who starts on some kind of spiritual path, it came out of suffering. You know, I think that's true for most people. You do something because you need to. And like a lot of people, I had a lot of suffering. And so I was looking for ways both to feel better and to also be able to contribute, to be able to do something that had some meaning that impacted the world positively.
So let's start with the meditation practice then, and then we'll sort of work our way into all these other things you do.
Okay.
So tell me about your meditation practice and how, where did that begin? You said it started from suffering, and that was sort of involved in all of these other things, motivated you to get involved in all these other things, but what about the meditation in particular?
Well, so when I started meditating, what I discovered was a quietness and peace that I had never encountered before. I discovered that there was something that was stronger and bigger, but also quieter and stiller than me that I could connect with and access. And I think for a lot of people, it can be like being in nature, you know, or being out on the water or something like this, where you really get a sense of yourself as being, you know, less dramatic. Like the drama is just less important, you know, like the me stuff, like, okay, well, whatever. There's a quietness I can touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had an experience like that a bunch of years ago. I was on retreat, and when I got back, I was on retreat for 2 months.
Yeah,
when I got back to the city, I was like, what's with all the drama?
Right.
Like people are like yelling at each other and couples are fighting and I don't know. And I was like, I remember being completely taken back by like, what was with all the drama? And so do you have any sort of personal experiences with that? Or how did you want your life to be better without the drama?
Well, one way it really impacted my life was when I was about 34, I was in a 10-year relationship which ended. And I was pretty devastated and didn't end particularly pleasantly. And I had been, there's a cute little book that Jack Kornfield edited called like Sayings of the Buddha, or I don't know what it was. Anyway, it has one little saying per day. And I, for maybe a year or some more at that point, had been opening it regularly, and whatever came up with that day, to write whatever ended page, I would try and live that. And so while I was going through this breakup, I kept getting the same page over and over and over again. And what it said was, life is so difficult. How can we be anything but kind?
Right.
And it really took me out of my anger and out of my desire for retribution and revenge and punishment, and also out of my judgment of my former partner. You know, it just took me to a place of like, life is difficult. Life is so difficult. How can we be anything but kind? And it took me back to what was true for me, regardless of external circumstances, that I wanted to be a kind person, and that I wanted to be a strong person with the capacity to deal with difficult circumstances without turning into something I didn't like.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then where did you, or how did you start to meditate then?
Well, it's a long, long story. Gosh, I have no idea what the answer to that question is really. But the way it sort of grew formally is I started looking for places where people were doing meditation that I liked. I went to Quaker Meeting. I went to the Quaker Meeting House right here in Brooklyn for a while. Wonderful. I recommend it to everyone, right? I went to the Shambhala Center a bunch of times. I went to the Zen Center right around here too. It was called Fire Lotus at the time. I think it might have changed its name. I actually did a retreat for a weekend there, which was very amusing because I was within walking distance of my apartment, but I didn't go home. And all of that, and finally, I found my way to the tradition I ultimately ended up practicing with, which is the Community of Mindfulness founded by Thich Nhat Hahn.
And tell me more about Thich Nhat Hahn and what that's all about?
So Thich Nhat Hahn is a Vietnamese monk. He's 88 now. He's an amazing person. He became a monk very young, and then, of course, the Vietnam War happened, which they didn't call the Vietnam War, of course. And in the Vietnam War, he saw a great deal of horrific suffering, as we all know. And many things happened to him, but finally, he ended up creating an organization of young people who were dedicated to helping people who were victims of the war. And they would go into villages that had been bombed, and they would help people like bury their dead and soothe mothers with dead children, and just all the things that one has to do in times of war. And Thich Nhat Hanh started developing a sense of what it means to be peaceful in the middle of great war. And ultimately what happened was he became a speaker, and he started traveling. He was invited to, I think it was Princeton and other places. And while he was in the US, the Vietnamese government exiled him. And the reason they did that is because he wouldn't take sides on the war for North or South. He kept saying there is no North or South. This is an illusion, and as long as we embrace this illusion, we're trapped, but there is no reality in it. So then he stayed in the States for many years, and he created various organizations here. He was quite influential with Dr. Martin Luther King. And Dr. King ended up nominating Thich Nhat Hanh for the Nobel Peace Prize. So he's been a peace activist for many years, and over the last several years, he's developed various practice centers around the world where people can go and practice with him. And so my first introduction was I went to Plum Village in France, which is a wonderful place. And I did, I was there for 9 days. And this was my first real embrace of Buddhist practice as something that I knew as my own.
So tell me a little bit about the practice then. What was it like, or even what is your practice like?
Yeah. Well, the thing I like the most about the practice that the Community of Mindfulness that Thich Nhat Hanh develops is it's really about being mindful in daily life. So even if I'm moving this, I can do it mindfully, meaning my attention is on what I'm doing. If I'm drinking, I can drink mindfully. If I'm speaking with you, a part of me can remain careful and conscious and aware of who I'm being as I'm speaking. I can walk mindfully, and as I do this, I contact that quietness I mentioned earlier. So I can begin to contact that quietness in day-to-day life. And I'll tell you, we talked about the drama. The drama's all over the place, right?
Yeah.
At our work, in our homes, on the street, if you're driving, a bicyclist in the bike lane, you get too close, all these dramas, right? As I practice slowing down and being more and more present with the moment I am, I train myself to be able to allow these things to happen without them throwing me away.
Right. And what does that mean, throwing you away?
Throwing me away means that I'm gone. So maybe I'm raging, or maybe I'm depressed, or maybe I'm hopeless. Or maybe I'm just caught up in it, like online, right? Just I'm not there. I'm just sort of following one link and the next link and the next link.
Right. 6 hours go by, and
Facebook, 6 hours. It's incredible, right? So so life is full of these seductions, and there's nothing fundamentally wrong with it, but we're not there,
right?
And we don't have a great deal of choice in that moment. We're sort of caught, as
the hook.
The hook. Shempa.
And so, why do we care if we're caught with the hook? I mean, how does that affect your life?
Well, let me get real concrete, because there's all kinds of philosophical ways to talk about this, but let me just say I am a person with a temper.
Oh, really? I had no idea.
It's true. And if you ask my family, they will happily affirm it.
Interesting.
So if I'm not paying attention, there are all kinds of things that might lead to me losing my temper. What I've discovered over the years, actually this is not, I didn't make this up, everyone knows it who does this kind of work, but I discovered it for myself. When I'm tired, I'm much more vulnerable to getting angry. In AA, they have a saying, HALT, which stands for hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And the idea is if you're any one of those things, then you've got to know you're vulnerable. And so what I can know is that if I am in a state in which I'm vulnerable and someone walks by me and whacks me on the leg with their heavy bag, I'm going to get furious instantly.
Right.
So it's not because of the bag, and it's not because I'm a bad person, it's because I was vulnerable to start with. And so mindfulness allows me to become more aware of the truth of my experience and of my own failures to be perfect, right? So I can admit to myself I have a temper. I can admit to you I have a temper without shame, because it's just the truth. I don't want to yell at people, and so it's really important for me to know I have a temper. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so what happens, so you have a meditation practice, so let's go there for a second. Tell me about your meditation practice.
Okay, well, for me, what's really important is silence in the morning. Now, I do it a bunch of different ways. I'm really lucky. I live in some woods. And so sometimes I'll just walk through the woods. Sometimes I'll sit. If I don't give myself that silence, I'm lacking some stability all day. So that's the most important thing. How long it is isn't as important, but I will say that 20 minutes seems to be about the cutoff to really get some good settling. But
You
if
say
I
minimum, 20 minutes minimum.
Yeah. But if I have 5 minutes and that's all I have, that 5 minutes can transform the day. I think what happens if you do reasonably long sits and then short ones, the short ones are influenced by the longer ones.
Yeah, I think so.
So that first practice in the morning. And then the other thing for me is mindfulness during the day. I have a lot of reminders. I have little notes that pop up on my phone. I have Post-its. I have things, like I have little visual things that when I see them, I remember. I usually have bees. I just broke it, actually.
Oh, nice.
But they remind me to stop. And I have a great stopping practice that I'll share with you at some point if you're interested.
Okay, yeah, no, definitely. So so the practice, now let's talk about how does that affect you when that person whacks you with the bag on the street. How are those two things related?
Okay, so this begins to touch on my work as a therapist, because this is what I work with people all the time, people with a lot of reactivity. If I have developed some stability and then the guy whacks me on the leg and I have a reaction, right? Of course. I'm like, hey, internally, right? If I'm really relatively stable, then this comes into space with a lot of headroom, right? So I can be like, I'm good, right? So there's the shock, there's the startle, but I'm good. And then I can allow myself just naturally to recover. But if I don't have a lot of headroom,
The halt that you were talking about, you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
right, right, or a number of other things, right? I've, gotten some bad news, or, we begin to learn. If I'm vulnerable in any way, I still can use my practice because I can catch it as soon as I can, right? So I might go, hey, and if the person's like, sorry, and I'm like, it's okay, no problem. I can catch it much more quickly.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways that it feeds in, but basically what it does is it creates a nervous system that's more resilient. It comes back more quickly.
And that's good. Why?
Because when our nervous system is not resilient, we get stuck in the stress response. We get stuck in fight or flight. And in fight or flight, it's called that because we're basically either we want to kill the person or get away. That's all we got.
Yeah.
It's a
And
very
that's no
limited
way for us to live our everyday lives.
But we know we do it, right? Road rage, we've all done it.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about a related topic, which is your sort of interest in peace.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to put that just like that. So
Great.
What's your interest in peace?
Well, I would love to be able to help the world be more peaceful. And, I look around the world like everybody, and I'm sometimes just horrifically appalled, right? And my life is pretty good and pretty peaceful for the most part, particularly since I've been an adult. I certainly live in a country in which I can be quite peaceful. But there are lots of people in our country who cannot, And so I started realizing I wanted to do something, and I had no idea what. So I read a book by Marianne Williamson called Healing. It was called The Healing of America. She reissued it with another name, but it was all about what America could do to heal. And in it, she suggested creating circles where people would gather together and explore ways as a small community that they could create peace. So I decided to do it, and I did. And it was amazing because it happened to be at a time when Marianne was pouring a lot of energy into expanding it. So I became like the New York coordinator, and I met with her a bunch of times, and it was really a powerful experience. And so I started leading a peace circle in my house every Sunday. I made a promise to do it for 1 year, no matter what happened, if it went well, if it went poorly, just to make sure I had the chance to make it work. And by the end of the year, we had a core of people coming every week who all had made a very intense commitment to find ways that they could make a difference. So sometime in the second year, I had this realization that we could, you know, maybe wave a magic wand, create peace, right? Everybody in a good mood, with enough food, all wars ended, they forgot about the conflicts with their neighbors from the last 1,000 years, you know. And, but what would happen is at some point, someone would accidentally hurt someone else. I actually had a vision of a brick in a road and someone walking along and tripping on the brick and breaking his toe. And this escalating into an argument, escalating to a fight, accidentally someone getting killed, and it turning into this vendetta between families. So this was, I was just sitting imagining all this, and I thought, all right, the way I need to contribute then is to help people be less reactive. And I decided to get some training. And I studied for 4 years in a program called the Helix Healing Ministry. I'm an ordained minister. And I learned a lot about ways that we can help people heal. And so since then, I've been working professionally as a therapist and leading groups so people can learn to be more peaceful in their lives and therefore elsewhere.
So I think that you are involved in peace in a couple of different ways. I think you're involved in peace because you're a therapist, and so you're helping people one-on-one. I think you're involved in peace, like in your own self, because you're like meditating and doing this mindfulness practice.
For sure.
But I think you're also involved in peace activism in other ways.
Well, there's a bill in Congress to create a cabinet-level Department of Peace, and it's been reintroduced many times over the years.
It's like Department of Defense, Department of Peace.
Exactly, exactly. And the idea is to have someone at the cabinet level who's coming to it from that point of view. The bill itself is really complete and has all kinds of provisions for various things in society where there's a need for an infusion of peace. For example, I don't know if you know this, but the suicide rate among policemen is really high.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Really high. You know, they face such terrible things, and they're the enemy of so many people. And of course, we know there are bad cops, but there are also good cops. And my guess is they're probably the ones who kill themselves more. And the point being that we have a situation in which their suffering is leading them to take their own lives. So the bill includes provisions for creating support for policemen. Yeah, so a lot of very specific things like that. There's also a provision to create a peace academy. So it's a very complete bill, and the way a bill goes through Congress, I'm not an expert on this, but basically it gets reintroduced, it gets a bunch of sponsors, it doesn't go to vote. It falls off. It gets reintroduced, it gets a bunch of sponsors. And so, you know, the women's suffrage bill had to go through, I think, for 30 years before it got passed. So, no, you know, we can know just because it hasn't passed doesn't mean it's not vital.
Keep trying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I also know that you're involved in another project where you're trying to get the whole world to meditate together.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Okay, this is a little bit of a pipe dream, but I'm very excited about it. And so there are a lot of global initiatives for meditation. And one of the things that I realized a bunch of years back is that, as I was describing with the bill, the work I'm doing probably won't bear fruit in my lifetime. And that doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. But I actually recently had a newer idea, and I was like, why not? I think it was prompted partly by 350.org, who are really pushing to address the issue of climate change, like really pushing. It's sort of like, they're like, it's kind of now or never. Like, we must deal with this. And So I started to think, why not? I know people in Israel, I know people in Morocco, I know people in America, in England, in Dublin, in Holland, who are all working for peace, all of them. And so this is my idea, to bring together many, many, many different people who have huge followings. For example, Deepak Chopra has a 21-day meditation he does with Oprah on an ongoing basis. They have thousands of people in that. There's a World Peace Meditation Initiative for the 21st of September, World Peace Day. Then there are lots of small organizations. I was talking with a minister as a very small parish. He's interested in participating. So from huge organizations to tiny ones, to bring it all together and create something that starts on the solstice, which of course is a geographic or geological time frame as opposed to a cultural one, right? That starts on the solstice, so December 31st, and runs for one full year. And that globally, around the world, there's some group meditating every hour for one full year. So we have one full year of dedicated, nonstop meditation. So, you know, in Australia, it's the middle of the night when it's our day, so there could be some team in Australia meditating. And each of the leaders who participates in this, and again, a leader of one or a leader of thousands, doesn't matter. Each of the leaders who wants to can take a slot. So you might want to lead a meditation on May 21st at 7 a.m., right? And so at that time, you are presenting it through this global website, and anyone can log on and join it. And there might be Christians, there might be Muslims, there might be atheists, there might be neuroscientists. Lots of neuroscientists are interested in meditation now. Because we're seeing the very real effects on the brain. So any leader at all, and everybody can present it from their point of view. And so we start to begin to participate in this kind of ecumenical process, this broad-based process where we recognize we're all moving toward the same thing. We're just taking a lot of different paths.
So, I mean, are you envisioning, I mean, why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you think that having everybody meditate for 1 year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week will benefit peace? Or what is your goal in this? Or is it just 1 year project?
Well, who knows, right? You know, there are a lot of people with a lot of beliefs. And for example, there are a lot of people who really believe in the energy of manifestation. But most of them are focusing on like manifesting business things. But they're good people. So why not pour that energy into manifestation of peace? And then there are a lot of people praying, and they're praying for many things. So why not bring that together? And, you know, there's a really lovely podcast called Sidling Up to Our Differences, where Krista Tippett, who I'm sure you know well, is interviewing a man, I don't know his name, so sorry, but he talks about, you know, if we can connect over our similarities, like, you know, you and I maybe are two different faiths and two different backgrounds, but we both love bowling. Let's just love bowling together, you know? So this creating of a commonality that we can really connect to, but with a very, 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 very broad base. The other piece of it, from a neurological point of view, the more we can focus on peace, the more peaceful we become. We experience the benefits. Physiologically, the stress response diminishes. The stress response is very bad, you know, causes inflammation, causes heart disease, causes diabetes. It really triggers all these inflammation responses in the body. So there are a million reasons why this might be good. And I think just the steady year. Oh, there's one other aspect of this that I think is kind of fun. And that's to create an online log of who's meditating when. So you can either sign on at the time, or you can log on later and say, I did it for, you know, 15 minutes at 12. So we have this graph of people around the world meditating all the time. We can begin to feel like part of this gigantic community, which we are, you know.
Yeah, we totally are.
It's sort of like the Russian and American astronauts in the 60s and 70s. They were flying over the world, and they were looking down, and they were saying, there are no boundaries. There are no boundaries. They had these experiences where they were just like, wow, it's the truth. They got it at this somehow truth level. There are no boundaries.
Right.
We've got to start to dissolve them. They just exist in our minds.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we're running out of time now, and I'm wondering if there's anything else you wanted to make sure you got in before we end this segment, this very first segment.
Yeah, I would. Well, let me just say, if you're interested in this global peace initiative thing, we've got a website. It's solstice2solstice.org. So that's with a 2, a number 2 in the middle, solstice2solstice.org. Yeah. And I want to just say, everybody can be a leader. Everybody can be a leader. All we have to do is choose to become a leader. And so the first thing we do is we lead ourselves in the direction of our well-being and our happiness, and we connect with other people with that energy. Maybe it's our church, maybe it's our school, maybe it's our, Zumba class, doesn't matter, our bicycling group, our wrestling group, doesn't matter.
Did you say wrestling?
Yeah, why not? My brother's into mixed martial arts, They love one another. They care about one another.
They kick each other's ass.
And they kick each other's ass. Yeah.
Great. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to, we're going to be doing another segment, and we'll be talking more about meditation. And we'll be talking maybe a little bit about what the meditation's going to, what meditation is and all that other things. But, not only will we have that next segment, but maybe we'll also be able to have more segments in the future together.
Great.
I'm thinking we're going to have all kinds of maybe panel discussions and more meditation, and that's all we have time for today, Mary.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.